This is Sean with Voices of White River Yacht Club. We're here with the president, Rick Ward. Rick, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, thank you.
Well, I appreciate you sitting down with me today so we could do a nice example for the club of essentially we're going to be covering positions and your career. We're also going to be covering honoring different members that are alive and gone, and also some memories of your dad that happened to win the Indy 500 2 years, 1959 and 1962.
Yep.
His name is Rodger with a D.
Rodger Ward, yep.
That's right. All right. So let's just kind of start from the beginning. I know you were born in the Indianapolis area. Is that right?
Yes.
And you went literally to White River Elementary School.
Yes. We moved into the neighborhood. I think I was 6 or 7 years old. Lived right down the street. Went to White River Elementary when I was young, and ended up going to North Central. But yeah, I grew up right down the street from the yacht club here.
And your parents, their names?
My mom's name was Diane,
and Keith was
and
your dad?
my stepdad Keith. We lived here, yeah.
And what were their industries? What was kind of a little bit of their
my
background?
mom was she was in the insurance industry, more of a I don't want to say a secretary, but administrative assistant in the insurance business. Got to be a representative in the insurance industry. Worked for several industries. Conseco, one of them that she worked for. Trying to think what the other one was. It escapes me at the moment, but yeah, that's what she did. And Keith was he worked for the Hoover Corporation, the vacuum cleaners.
Okay.
Sold those for years, and he was retired when he met my mom, and so he did woodworking in the garage. He had a shop set up, did a lot of woodworking. Almost lost one of his fingers due to a little mishap. I think he stopped doing the woodworking after that.
All right. So overall, the purpose of what we're going to be starting and doing and accomplishing here today is to not just save some of the stories of your life, people you've been able to work with and involved with, but also, people that have passed, like your father, and also honor some people at the club.
Yeah.
So that could be an option for families and people at the club. What do you think about the base concept as it being an option for the families, not just to save some club memories, but also some family memories that can be passed on for generations?
I really like the concept. I think it's fabulous that you interview people, and I've seen some of the work that you do, and I think it's really important that you capture the history of your family, because anymore, the history just doesn't get passed on, and you lose those things. I mean, I'm lucky enough that I was able to get some of the history, but unfortunately, my mother passed away at 65 from cancer unexpectedly. I wasn't able to ask her more about our family history, and I realized that afterwards. I was like, there were so many questions that I wanted to ask, that I wanted to get the background of our family, that I just never got a chance, or never got around to asking, because you think that they're going to be around forever, and all of a sudden, cancer diagnosis, and she couldn't speak anymore, and it was in her brain, so it was one of those things that, she couldn't really understand us, so it was tough. It was tough on us.
So one of the things that kind of came to light through COVID, and before COVID, it was interviewing people about their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And then when COVID hit, kind of saw a bigger picture that actually spawned into the racing community, and that's interviewing people that know somebody else.
Yeah.
So you can get the collective knowledge of somebody who's still alive or somebody who's gone. And the answers within the racing community, they had us do 50 different documentaries about them for Al Unser Jr.'s 60th birthday to surprise him. It was about a 3-month process. From Mario Andretti and Michael Andretti and Doug Bowles, the president, and Eddie Cheever and Scott Goodyear and Willie T. Ribbs and all these old legends.
Right, right.
As we dive into your father, we're also going to, find out some of the guys he was able to race with and whatnot. But let's get, down to the career and then also the club. So your career, I know that you had a background in construction and also in printing industry, and you're doing real estate.
Yes.
Now.
Realtor now. I didn't have much in the way of jobs when I was young. I bounced around a little bit, ended up landing a job in the printing industry. Stayed there between a couple different companies for about 18 years. Started at the bottom and then went all the way up to running printing presses. And for me, it was a job. It was a way to make a living and a way to support my family and that type of thing. And after that, it just started to fall apart. Printing, because everybody has a printer at home now.
Right, or
so
digital.
Or digital. So the way things were going in the printing industry, I decided to leave that, try to do some deliveries and start my own company. That didn't work out. So I ended up in the construction business. One of the members here, we happened to be standing around talking, and he said, I'll hire anybody that'll show up every day and work. And I said, well, I show up every day for work. So I ended up going into the construction, and it happened to be masonry restoration, building restoration.
Right.
Tuck pointing and caulking and masonry work, until it got to be about 55 years old. And that was a little bit too much for me, a little arthritis in the hands,
sure.
And a little bit too much for an old guy like me to keep going into construction. So I quit that and got my realtor's license, and that's what I'm doing now.
So when you originally, the better question, who originally introduced you to this property, this building? Who was the one that brought you to the club?
So I had actually come to the club.
And what year?
Well, I can't exactly say what year, because I came to the club when I was a child, because we lived down the street and our neighbors were members, and they were very good friends with my parents. And coincidentally, their oldest son was born on May 31st, 1962, and was named Rodger after my dad. Bob Clark, a member who's passed away, been long gone, he named his son Rodger after my dad because he was born on race day. So, but Bob and Judy Clark, they were great people. We came down a few times when I was young, me and my sister. And then I had been here a few times over the years for different events, because I knew of the place and had friends that were some members. And it was in 2000.
That was
it was year 2000. My wife's cousin, Robin Croce, who is no longer with us, great man, great prankster. He loved to play practical jokes on people.
Right.
Well, he asked if we wanted to go in on a boat. He says, "Hey, we can buy a pontoon boat for $1,500. You want to get in on it?" I said, "Sure, why not?" Yeah, we were living one block.
What year was the boat? Let's do some math.
Well, okay, so the boat was a 1969. So the boat was almost as old as me.
Got it.
It was a 1969 Harris, and it was just a little bitty pontoon boat. But we lived a block away from the river, my wife and I at that time, and we decided to go, and we had a place to park it. And I thought, well, if I'm going to be on the river, I've got to be a member of the White River Yacht Club.
Sure.
So that summer, I put my application in and joined. Back then, we did not have a waiting list. So I put my application in, and about a month later, I was a member.
Didn't you have to have somebody recommend you?
I did.
And who was that?
I did. Robin was not a corporate member. You have to be a corporate member to sponsor someone. So he got two of his friends, Jim Keeler and John Clifford, both who still are here and corporate members. Both of them sponsored me. Of course, at the club, knowing the procedure, you have to go in front of all the members. And Robin, being a prankster that he is, he says, "Well, you realize you have to say the Pledge of Allegiance at the beginning of the meeting by yourself." And I was like, oh my gosh, I can remember all the words. And when you say it with everybody, it's easy. But when you're doing it all on your own, you got to try and remember all the words. Of course, when I got up at the beginning of the meeting, I was not called to call. He was just joking with me. Of course, that was Robin. He was the prankster. But so those guys, two good guys, sponsored me, and I've been a member ever since.
So if you were going to say, this is kind of on the memories part of it. So And what were the first names again?
Jim Keeler,
Jim,
and John Clifford.
Jim and John. All right. So how would you describe John's personality with the other club members?
John doesn't come around too much anymore. I mean, he's 20 years older than he was then. He was a good guy. He's he's a straight shooter, a good guy. But he and Robin and Jim, they had a boat called Tres Amigos together, and they got up and down and had a lot of fun. I remember one year, because we were partners on the boat, and I was at the Brickyard 400 for the NASCAR race at the Brickyard. So apparently Robin took the boat with a couple of his buddies, and they went up to the old landings, which is now Solana. Back then we had a beach. Well, he ran that boat so far up on the beach that the pontoons were underwater. The back of the pontoons were underwater, and they were all sitting on the back of the boat watching the Brickyard on a TV on the next boat. Well, that boat was so old that the welds had cracks in them. And he didn't realize it because he was out there having a few suds and having a good time, that he was sinking the boat. So when the race was over and they were on their way back, there was a couple other members that came up beside him and said, "Hey, Rob, you know your boat's sinking, your motor's about to go underwater." So the members pulled up beside him and they strapped the boat, and they got the boat back here to the club, and they got it on the boat. They got the boat on the trailer, and they were very lucky when they got it into the yard and they disconnected the trailer from the truck, that the tongue went flying into the air, and had one of them been standing over it, it probably would have knocked him out, almost killed him. But it buried the thing was so full of water, it buried the pontoons about 4 inches into the ground because it was wet. So we had to dig out around the back of them to get the drain plugs and unplug those holes and let the boat drain out. But that boat is currently serving as a dock on the river and is still floating.
So speaking of docks, during COVID, which was a down, sad time for everybody, you guys accomplished building 9 different docks out here. If you kind of expand on that story and what you did, how that kind of came to fruition, and we had members coming together to actually get that done and help the club during COVID.
Yeah, well, we had decided prior to COVID that we were going to, we needed new docks. The docks we had out here were just 55-gallon barrel docks, just the standard blue barrel docks. They float, but they're a little unstable at times, and if you get a hole in the barrel, then you got problems with the dock. We had an ice jam one year. We left the docks in, had an ice jam, busted 3 or 4 sections of the dock. So we decided to go with pontoon docks. We were able to purchase the pontoons themselves separate. And then when COVID hit, we were shut down. We had nothing to do. It was starting, it was March going into April, so the weather was decent. And there was a group of us that just decided to come down and start putting them together.
Who were some of those people? Who were some of the guys?
Well, there was Greg Murphy and Scott Clayton and Greg Dobbin-Speck and Tom Kaler and trying to think. There was Mike Boone was one of them. You know Mike Boone. Yep. He didn't come down at first because of COVID, but all of us, just the core group, started doing this, and we all seemed fine. None of us were getting sick. Right. It was all good. Slowly, we got more and more people that would come down and help us, and we built 9 24-foot pontoon docks that are currently out in front of the club right now.
2 pontoons per dock?
2 pontoons per dock.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just like basically you take a pontoon boat and strip the decking off. Right. And strip off the decking that you would have on the boat and put wood decking on the whole thing. So with metal and cleats and all that, and we bought all the hardware, had the hardware shipped here. And so a bunch of us put all those docks together and just gave us something to do, as well as all the all the wooden tables inside the club was one of the other things we did during COVID. We were able to keep the servers busy, had them sanding the tables. And then when we got done with the docks were mostly done, I was able to spend my time finishing the tables. The servers would sand them down and get them ready, and then I would come in with some polyurethane and finished all the wooden tables, 30 some wood tables here at the club. Just they needed it, and it was something for us to do, and we wanted to make sure that the servers were able to stay busy, and the ones that didn't have regular jobs, keep them busy and keep them working.
So you were essentially involved in pretty much every position here.
Pretty much.
I mean, a lot of them, right?
Yeah.
So your entertainment.
Yeah. When I started,
membership, Commodore, Sergeant at Arms, multiple years for all of them.
Yeah.
Many years for all of them. The first one, was that entertainment, or what was the
first one was entertainment. When I became a member, which was in June of 2000, this was a volunteer club. And so you had to volunteer for something. And at that time, the easiest committee to get onto, the one that was the most flexible, was the entertainment committee. All you had to do was show up and present your ideas of what you wanted to do for entertainment for the members. So we did many things like Monte Carlo nights, and we did a Mardi Gras night, and we would do basically some sort of major function once a month, whether it be on the water during the summer months with things like the scavenger hunt, where we would literally make up clues, which is an idea I got from somebody else. I stole this idea from somebody years earlier. Make up riddles to find clues. Then you had to take a picture of the clue, and then everybody had a certain amount of time to go out. They had their sheets. They would go out and they would find the clues and bring them back. Each clue was worth a certain amount of points.
Somewhere on the river?
Somewhere on the river, yes.
What's an example of something they had to bring back?
Well, mostly pictures.
Okay.
You just back then it was Polaroid.
Got it.
There wasn't a whole lot of cell phones out there.
Okay.
But we would take Polaroids, and you'd have to take a picture. Like if somebody had a certain decoration in their yard, and I could go back and try and figure out some of the clues. It's been 20 years ago. And you would make up a riddle about somebody that had a pink flamingo in their yard. And you would have to figure out the riddle and then find that, oh, that's the pink flamingo they want to. So they'd take a picture of the pink flamingo and they would write it down on their sheet, pink flamingo, and bring us back the pictures. And we would have 10 or 12 boats full of people going out looking for all these clues all day long. We even have them stopping here at the club. We would have them we'd set out 3 shot glasses. 2 of them were water, 1 of them was vodka. You couldn't smell them or touch them or taste them, but you had to pick out which one was the glass of vodka versus the water, and that gave you points. It was stuff like that we came up with. We also did a Taste of the River, which was a
house-to-house party?
House-to-house, progressive party.
Yep.
It started out, we did this for several years. We usually would do the scavenger hunt one year and the Taste of the River the next year. So it was a lot of work putting those big events together. You had to get 7 or 8 people that would offer to open up their homes, because we have several nice homes and people wanted to see these homes. But it was also a way to get to know the members and offer light hors d'oeuvres, or one person on the river, Jay Waymeyer, he had a bartender come in and served us smoothies as we went to his house. So Ralph Canal Sr., he has a beautiful home. He was a manufacturer, distributor of wood products. So his house had a lot of wood in it. And he also had a wine cellar in the basement. So when we stopped at his house, we could have a small glass of wine and some cheese. We would start off with breakfast, and somebody would fix biscuits and gravy.
Wait, this was a whole day?
This is a whole day. Now, what we did to make it work was that each stop would only have to be open for a couple of hours. So they didn't have to spend all day. That way you'd have 2 spots open for the first 2 hours. Basically, we make this about 100 people to be involved. You had to go by boat, and they would split up themselves. Half of them would go to one location, half of them would go to the other location for about an hour. Then you'd see everybody on the river going back and forth to this other location. Then everybody would move on to the next 2 locations. And then at the end of the day, we'd end up with at one location, everybody, and had a big party at the end of the day and have a band. So it was an all-day event, and people got to see some beautiful homes and enjoy company with friends and enjoy the river and enjoy a beautiful day.
All right, so what would you say have been some major benchmarks of growth for the club? Situations of physical expansion or of organizational expansion that you've really seen, kind of levels that, we started doing this and then these were the bigger benefits. Like what are some things that have really kind of grown the club over the years?
Well,
even thinking back even before.
Yeah, before me,
you were involved.
When I became a member, of course, years ago when I came down as a guest back in the 80s and 90s, this room, what we called the meeting room, was here. But that deck was not out there. The kitchen was very small. When I was a child, the bathrooms were upstairs. We came down and there was an empty room upstairs that basically was the kids' playroom. There was a box full of toys, and anybody who came down with a kid would send him upstairs, and us kids would play upstairs. And when anybody had to use the restroom, they would go up the stairs, open the door, and check on it. You guys still all alive? You're not killing each other, are you? Okay, good. Back then it was nice, and but then over the years we've expanded. We added the kitchen. We've done so many projects over the years that's hard to recall just the beginnings and ends of them. We just redid this deck out here, this Riverside deck. Put all new composite on it. It was starting to get a little weak, so we put all new composite decking on it this summer. Like I said, adding the covered deck. 4 or 5 years ago, we added heat to that covered deck, and we spent almost $30,000 on the automatic curtains that raise and lower out there on that covered deck. We had old fabric curtains that were disintegrating, and we spent the money, and now all those curtains on the deck out there have a remote control to make them go up and down. Just been a lot of things over the years. Do
you happen to remember, I mean to cut you off,
that's all right,
but raft race.
Oh,
Do you
yes,
remember it?
I do. I was a little young when they first started, but near the end, I did have some friends and I who participated in the raft race. I'm sure I was over the legal drinking age as we floated up and down the river in our makeshift plywood raft. But yeah, we had a lot of fun. I remember watching it when I was young. When I was old enough to build my own raft with some friends, we participated in the last couple of years. That was a lot of fun.
I got to interject my memory. So I was probably 6, 7, 8 years old or whatever, and we were at one of my dad's clients. They had a house on the opposite side of the river, and everything was going down the river. And there was a guy that took a lazy boy chair, recliner, and put it on 2 barrels, and that was his raft. And he was just paddling the lazy boy with a beer helmet that he was drinking from the beer helmet with hoses. And I was asking, I'm like, Mom, is this normal? I mean, I grew up literally 4 houses down from the locomotive in Brownville Park on Roslyn.
Oh yeah.
So I could see that from the front yard. Then we moved to Lake Maxenhaw, went to Christ King and Chittard, then Ball State and everything. So I've got some fun memories of the raft race as well. Now, your wife is named Ann, correct?
Yes. That's correct.
And how long have you been together?
Well, we've been together. We've been married for 17 years. We actually met 20 years ago in 2004.
And did you meet here at the club?
Actually, we did, yes. Mike Boone, which you have interviewed. My wife's was not married at the time, and she was a huge race fan. She's a huge race. Her father, God rest his soul, Bill Henry, was an even bigger race fan. But she grew up watching Indy 500 and going to the races and going around the country to different races. She was a huge race fan. And Mike said, "Hey, would you like to meet Rodger Ward's son?" You know, and we met and went on a few dates, and we got married in 2007.
So what really about her? Because obviously she wasn't the first person you ever dated.
No,
but you decided to marry her. So what were some aspects about her personality that you thought this is going to be a good teammate?
Well, my wife is a wonderful, wonderful woman who puts up with me. She's extremely honest. She's very beautiful, and she's just got a really good heart and a really good soul. And you know, it's not like any other relationship. We've had our rocky moments over the years, but she stuck with me, and I've stuck with her, and we love each other, and she just has turned out to be, you know, the right person for me. You know.
And did you propose here at the yacht club?
No, I proposed to her at the Yard of Bricks at the Speedway.
Wow.
Good story. When it was 2006, and it was carb day at the track, and all of my guy friends knew what I was going to do. I'm walking around all day with a ring in my pocket. I'm nervous as hell. I'm freaking out. You know, none of her girlfriends had any clue. And we were, at that time, we were still able to park down in turn one. And we were with all of our friends. And I had this whole thing planned out. And the plan was to go up and watch a little bit of the pit stop competition. And on the way back, you can't really get on the track during that day,
Sure.
but there's the Yard of Brick that runs through the plaza.
Right.
And the plan was, on the way back from the pit stop competition, I would stop and propose her on the Yard of Bricks. Well, we left and went to the pit stop competition, and it was quite crowded, and it was hot. And a couple of her girlfriends went with us, and she was not very happy that we went there. She's like, "I'd rather be down in turn one, having a good time. I'm uncomfortable. It's crowded. We're sitting up here amongst all the people." And so my plan was starting to go awry. So we started to head back, and at this point in time, she's a little perturbed at me, a little pissed. And so she's walking probably 30 feet in front of me. And I'm trying to get her attention, and I stop at the Yard of Bricks, and I put the cooler down. I said, "Come back here, come back here." She says, "Why?" I said, "Well, I need to talk to you." "I don't want to talk to you right now. I want to get back to turn one." I'm like, "Just come here, please, come here, come here." She finally starts walking over to me, and she's still just mad at me. And I pulled her up close and said, "I'm trying to propose to you." And she got her eyes, and I knelt down on one knee, broke out the ring, proposed to her. At that very moment, a gal that I knew from racing, Gina Codolata, walked by and said, "Oh, that's so sweet." I looked up and recognized her. She recognized me. "Rick." I'm like, "Gina." Oh, she said, "Oh, wrong time." So my wife didn't like attention. She says, "Oh, get up, get up, get up." So I proposed to her on carb day at the Yard of Bricks at Speedway.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So as far as your father, what was the first year that he started racing? Like, how old was he when he really started?
Let's see. I'd have to do the math on how old he was, but he actually started racing before World War II.
Okay.
In midgets and stuff. He was a fighter pilot in World War II.
Okay.
He was not sent overseas because he was so good. Basically, if you think about him, he was Top Gun.
He's a trainer.
He was a trainer.
Wow.
And
was he Navy or was he Air Force?
He was Army Air Corps back then.
Got it.
And he flew and was one of the first test pilots for the P-38 Lightning, the double-tailed devil that the Japanese used to call. So they kept him here as a trainer. After the war, he stayed in the Army Air Corps and began racing. He was in the West Coast, and he was having some success.
Yeah.
And he was winning races. I think and I have to double check. I think he won at Gilmore Stadium.
Was he sprint at this point?
Midgets. They didn't really do sprint cars back then. They kind of evolved that class, but back then it was midgets.
Got it.
And they raced at Gilmore Stadium, which was a very famous stadium in California. And I think his name showed up in the newspaper as Lieutenant Rodger Ward of the U.S. Army Air Corps won the last night's feature. His commanding officer came in and called him into the office and said, "Well, Lieutenant Ward, you need to figure out if you're going to be part of this man's army or you're going to play off this racing stuff." My dad says, "Well, I'm making, a couple $100 a month in the army and I'm making $1,000 a night going racing. I think I'll go racing." So that was the end of the army career for him, and he made his way.
That was before World War II.
That was after World War II was over.
Okay,
so that was after World War II was over, and so he raced. He had some success, and he finally made it to the Speedway in 1951. So he started at Speedway in 1951. I think he was only one of only 3 drivers ever to run what they call the old sit-up style sprint cars, the old cars, and a roadster and a rear engine car at the Speedway.
Wow.
So there was only like 3 drivers that ever did that, and Dad was one of them. So he started in 51, struggled.
What was it like for you going out there and watching all this?
Well, I wasn't born. I mean, I did not get to, unfortunately, one of the things that I do kind of have a regret about, I never got to see him race competitively.
Wow.
Because he retired 2 years after I was born.
Okay.
So he struggled with several things. I mean, he was a key factor in Billy Vukovich dying in 1955. Bill was leading the race. My dad's car broke. Bill ended up hitting another car and going out of the park and unfortunately lost his life. But Bill Vukovich's wife, his dad was ready to quit. His wife convinced him to not quit, to stay in racing. Dad kind of had a reputation of, being a little bit of a playboy, He cleaned his act up, pretty much stopped drinking, got married, and settled down a little bit. And then he got picked up by Bob Wilkie. And it became the Flying W's, Ward, Wilkie, and Watson, which is my dad, Bob Wilkie, who is the team owner, and A.J. Watson, who is the mechanic, car builder.
Yeah.
So the 3 of them were basically pretty much unstoppable from 1959 until 1964.
I think I interviewed a guy that had a 38 Watson. Would that have been a car in 1938 that was?
Boy, that would have been a very, very early car for A.J. Watson. Yeah.
Okay.
But he was a car builder and out of Glendale, California.
Yeah.
And they had a lot of success. Said Dad won in Indianapolis in 1959. Finished at Indianapolis in the top 4 6 years straight.
That's amazing.
With a first, a second, a third, a first, a fourth, and a second. So
crazy.
Yeah. Finished second to AJ Foyt a couple times.
And how old did he live to?
Dad lived to be 83.
And how many years ago did he pass?
He died 20 years ago in 2004.
So
on July 5th.
Were you able to, I don't want to say secure, but, acquire a lot of the memorabilia from his racing time?
I have. I do own the 59 Borg Warner trophy at home.
Wow.
And I have some hardware, some bling that belongs to me. My older brother, Rodger Jr., had a lot of the stuff. He's almost 20. He's 20 years older than I am, 22 years older than me. But when he moved from Indianapolis to California, they have a place near the beach in California. They downsized, and he pretty much gave me almost everything that he had as far as memorabilia. So I have a lot of artwork, a few small trophies. The Borg Warner obviously is one of my prized possessions. But I have a lot of artwork that belonged to my dad, or people that have painted of my dad, or photos, and that type of stuff.
Besides racing, obviously he was a successful man in a lot of ways in the military and racing and everything else. What were some aspects of his personality that you really thought kind of made him stand out and have that drive to become a lieutenant, to become an IndyCar driver, become what were some facets?
He was
Rodger?
He was a very driven individual. He really was. He never liked to sit still. He liked to keep moving. He liked speed, obviously, as a pilot in the war and before and after. But he also had a very good soul, a very good heart. That's why he felt like he needed to quit after Vukovich died. And then it tore him up in '64. In 1964, when Eddie Sachs and Dave McDonald passed away at Speedway, I was literally 2 weeks old. And he's got a new wife and now a new baby. And he just watched two of his buddies. I mean, him and Eddie Sachs had been friends for years. And Dave McDonald and him, just over a short period of time, had become fast friends. And he said that was the toughest thing ever for him. Was looking down at the track and seeing all that smoke and knowing that two of his friends had just passed away. And, Jimmy Bryan drove his car and was killed at Langhorne. He just, and at 64, I think, was the beginning of the end for his career.
Or the motivation.
It just, and then he had success, but he split up with Bob Wilkie and A.J. Watson. Then my little sister was born in May, 10 days before the race in 65, and he missed the 1965 500. He teamed up with Meekum Racing Team. I think it was John Meekum. I don't think any relation with the auto auction series, but he owned the team back then. In 1966, Dad finished second in Phoenix and won at Trenton, and then came to Indianapolis. Both of those tracks are a little smaller. Then the car at Indianapolis was not right for him. He just never felt comfortable in the car. Halfway through the race, he pulled in and retired the next day at the victory banquet.
Wow.
And at the victory banquet, his speech was, I told myself that if ever stopped being fun, I was going to retire. And at the banquet, he said, yesterday was not fun. And having driven that car a little bit, a few times myself, I know the car being 50 years old, 60 years old makes a difference. But having had that car been restored and driven it, I never felt comfortable in that car either. And I've driven enough race cars that a few laps and I feel good in a car. I just never felt comfortable in that car. And I can imagine, even in its best day, that car was not something wrong in it. It just didn't steer correctly.
Right.
And not having driven it at his kind of speeds back in the day, I never felt comfortable in it. So I understand why he decided to retire.
What would you say would be one of your favorite memories with him describing could be winning the Indy 500. Like one of his favorite stories that he always kind of told you of being in it for all those years, or maybe a situation he got to sit down with Mario or blah 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 blah. I know he was younger than that.
Yeah, and he gosh, he used to love playing gin.
Yeah,
and he would always he would. I mean, unfortunately, my mom and dad, they got divorced when I was young, so I didn't get to spend a lot of quality time with him. When he would come back for the month of May, my sister and I, we were young. We rode in the parade with him.
right.
Got to do the parade wave and sit in the back of a pace car and do that type of thing. And I was able to, in my early 20s, I moved to California to live with him for a while, with the prospects of learning another job. Things didn't work out. My dad had such a great heart and trust. That was the one. He trusted so many people and trusted people, and unfortunately, a lot of people broke his trust, and he was just not that fabulous of a businessman. He owned a Firestone store here in Indianapolis, and he lived in California and let somebody manage it, and that manager basically robbed him blind, and they had to close the store, and he lost money. And it seemed to be kind of a little bit of a recurring theme after he retired. He had a hard time. I really believe that if he had stayed here in Indianapolis, instead of feeling like he needed to go to California for work, in California, even though it was fairly fresh, Indy 500 winner doesn't carry the amount of weight it would here in Indianapolis.
Correct.
But he loved California, and that's where he was from. Or, that's where he spent a lot of his years. So, he had a hard time finding, good, meaningful work out there.
Right.
He did. I mean, he ended up, doing okay for himself. But I was trying to think of what were some of the favorite stories. And it's my mind's going blank at the moment. I apologize.
No, it's fine. So, let's kind of bring it back to the club here and kind of in closing. I'm assuming there are some people that have recently passed that aren't around anymore. They love to be able to get their stories, as well as some people that are still here.
Yeah.
Who would you say would be some people that are here, that have been around a long time, that their stories should be saved?
Well, obviously, you've done a story with Mike Boone.
Yeah, we did his whole life stories.
And Mike's been here for a long, long time. Former Commodore Rex Willis. He's been here for a long, long time. Les Sebring. He's former Commodore. He's been here 40 years. Unfortunately, the people that have been around here for a long, long time are getting thinner and thinner.
Right.
The pool of those people are no longer around. And I miss them. One of my favorite guys was David Fox, 4-time Commodore, 30-year member of the board of directors between Commodore and all of his positions. Was actually my little league coach. My little league coach when I was young. He was a great man. I looked at him as a second father. He was really, excuse me, he was a really great man. I looked at him as a second father. He passed away in 2019. And when I became Commodore that year, when the club went through troubles in the late 2000s, we went through some financial troubles. We had some issues with some money disappearing in it. The membership blamed the board members, and Dave was no longer invited back to the board that year, and he said that he would never serve again, which I understood that. But when I became Commodore in 2019 for the first time, I asked him if he would serve on the board.
And he said yes. I was very proud of that, very happy that. And he passed away that winter. So he served about 4 or 5 months and then passed away. So, yeah.
Well,
Excuse me, honey.
No, I get it. Especially,
He was a special man, and he knew everything about this club. And yeah, he was Commodore during tough times and during good times, and was certainly somebody that should be honored and remembered, along with many others. We just lost George Foster, who was a longtime member, Army veteran, one of those guys that just did everything around here on his own.
right?
You never saw him. All of a sudden, things get done. He was what we called our flag man, because he always made sure that the flags were proper. And if the flag started getting tattered, he would bring that flag down and put a new one up. When it come to July 4th, you would notice that all brand new flags had lined the driveway of the club. And he was always big into Veterans Day, making sure that all the veterans got their due diligence. Members like that, once they're gone, it's just hard to get that information back.
Well, kind of the point of what we're doing is so those stories can live on about those people, so others can learn about it.
Yeah.
So even though people are gone, getting the collective knowledge from the people that want to honor them and know them, and so the others in the club can know the impact those people made.
Yeah,
it is important.
It is. I think it's extremely important for this club to pass down the history and the heritage of what this club has done and what it's, over our, 85, 90 years of being here, and the traditions and the way that people volunteered to do things here.
Right.
Not just help run the club, but almost every project, every facet of things that have been done around this club were done and built by volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
Back when the club had no money, and they needed something done, like our shelter house at the north end of the property. The members built that, and it's a beautiful shelter house, but they got up and they did it themselves,
Right.
Bought the materials and decided to have work parties and built that stuff. That's kind of what we did when we built the docks,
yeah.
and we still try to have that camaraderie through volunteerism at the club here. And unfortunately, we have lost some of the people who will step up and be a leader as far as building a project, and now we've lost that, and people just want to, at this day and age, people just want to throw money at problems. And if we have a project needs to get done, we'll just throw money at it instead of getting people to volunteer and join together and do it on their own. They just want to hire somebody to do it. Right. Which I get, there's a little bit of give and take in that, but I still think that the volunteer opportunities for people here at the yacht club are immense, and it really helps. When I joined here in 2000, I had not seen Dave Fox for 30 or 40 years. And all of a sudden, here's my Little League coach that turns out to be one of the most revered men that I ever knew. And, you create friendships for lifetime here. And I think it's really important for people to save that.
Right. I agree. Well, I thank you very much for your time today.
My pleasure.
I look forward to being able to help in numerous ways that we've already kind of talked about, but look forward to the road ahead, being able to help kind of save the stories of the people about their memories and the people that they respected and loved here at the club, and for their families as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your time and all your efforts, and I apologize for getting a little emotional.
It's all right. It happens when you're talking about the people that you respect and love in your life.
That's correct.
You're just normal like everybody else.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. We're going to close this out.
All right. Thanks, Sean.